you can see this.
Yeah, I can see that. Can everyone in the chat see that right now?
Okay, great. So thank you for joining. Thanks for the intro, Alfie. So today we're going to be talking about the untrackables. And today we actually have a mix of agencies in the room, I believe. But I guess one thing that maybe you're all interested in is how do we gain richness beyond performance data? And the reason why this talk was the reason why it was focused originally for media agencies is because there is so much richness that media agencies have on performance data. You understand audiences demographically, like who they are, where they are, that kind of thing, what media they're engaging with, what channels they're using, where they're watching. You've got insight into campaign effectiveness and how to tweak it and how to optimize. You've got competitor performance insight, who's winning, who's losing, some insight around trend forecasting. And interestingly, it's not just around behavioral data anymore. We now have more on sentiment and through social listening and all of that. I mean, there are some limitations with social listening now, and we're going to cover those a bit later. But it's just nice to see that performance data isn't just all about behaviors now. The real question that we want to cover off, though, is are we seeing the full picture? And, some people will say that the more data, the better. And some will say, like, it's better to have more focused data. For us, it's about making sure there's the right mix and that data doesn't just sit as data. Because obviously, data sort of tells you what to do, what's happening. But it doesn't tell you why it's happening. It doesn't tell you what to do with that data. It just tells you what's happening. So if we take things like a campaign that maybe was previously successful and we've run a similar campaign, why is it not successful this time around? Is it the wrong time or the wrong place? If we see certain things working in certain markets but not in other markets, what's the reason? Is it cultural? Is it economical? If we see that there's a certain drop-off in engagement at a certain point, why is that happening? Is it that people are overwhelmed with choice or they're distracted or something else has taken their attention away? It's all about understanding the why. And I believe that data gives you a lot of those clues, but the real insight comes from asking the right questions and speaking to people and connecting the dots. So that's what we're going to cover off today is how can you get more primary research? And I think the reason why a lot of this doesn't happen as much as it should is because what we hear time and time again is that research takes a lot more time and is very costly. And especially when you compare it to like easily accessible metrics. And the thing with the easily accessible metrics is that they tell you the hard facts. They tell you what's happening. It's easy for C-suite and board and brands to be on board with it and to understand what is happening and to kind of sit within their norms of what they're used to seeing. But what we're missing is the richness that research can bring. And we're going to cover some home truths today that address this kind of thing because research doesn't have to cost as much as we think it does. And it can be a lot quicker, especially now with technology and AI. And we're going to cover some of that later on. But first, we want to cover off 7 home truths, which really show the reason why we need to layer on insight on top of all the kind of performance data and performance metrics that you might already have. So the first one that I'm going to cover off is everyone's using the same data sources often. So yes, you might be using some CRM data from the brand, or you may be looking at performance data. But when you're looking at prospect audiences, a lot of what you're looking at is GWI data or candidate profiles or YouGov. And this is obviously very valuable and it's easily accessible and it takes a lot less time and it's within subscription and that's all great. There are some questions around some quality of data around that, like the NatRep, the national representation, things like the length of surveys that GWI audiences have to fill in and things like that. But I'm not here to question that. What we believe is needed is an additional unique richness added on top, because if you are using the same data that your brand's peers are using, then you're not going to create anything unique off the back of it. And so the smartest agencies are really building on top of that data, layering in qual, behavioral insight, cultural analysis, because what you want to do is add depth and context. Again, this sounds very meaty and sounds like it's very time consuming. And we're going to cover off ways that you can do that more effectively and just kind of bolt it onto what you already have today. Second thing that I want to mention is that we all know that consumer behaviors are changing, but the metrics that we use are still the same metrics that we've been using for years. And if we just take this one example of consumer behavior change, which is that around a third of consumers now spend longer making purchase decisions. So purchases are becoming a lot slower. We're doing slower shopping. We take longer to make decisions. We do more research, but we're still measuring short-term conversion. We're still looking at like last click attribution, and we're still looking at CTR. And we're not saying that those things aren't important to measure. They are important to measure, but they're not the only things that are important to measure. It would be interesting to see search volume over time, to look at multiple touch points and to understand engagement and interaction through different touch points. And even more interestingly would be to understand, why are things slowing down in certain situations? Is it a slowing norm, or is there economic uncertainty? Are people overwhelmed with choice? To understand where there are spikes and why. So a lot of research can build on that too. The point here isn't about taking this specific example of slower shopping. This is more about like being able to understand where are consumer behaviors changing, and then what metrics do we need to change, what new things do we need to measure and account for to cater for that behavior change, because then success changes. If we know behaviors are changing, then and we're measuring against those new behaviors, then we know what success means versus tracking the things that we've always tracked. The third one here is around, we know that marketeers use a range of metrics and a range of like measurement tools and platforms. And this is great for having lots of extra data, like having, lots of data that we're capturing here and lots of data that we're capturing here, but it can result in fragmenting the overall story. Like we don't have this holistic view of what is happening and why it's happening, and bringing that all together so that we're not just creating a narrative here and a narrative here and creating like micro optimized like solutions for this data point and micro optimized solutions for this data point. It's all about how does it all come together. And the other problem with this is that it causes a lot of inefficiency and inconsistency. Like if you can't unify your measurement, you're not telling one story, you're doing like lots of analysis in different points. And sometimes it can lead to contradictions as well. So there's an opportunity for how it all comes together. And it may be through things like brand trackers, but it may also be through, just having an insight report that brings in the different data points together, or having a tool that brings in all the different data points together. The fourth one here is around not overly relying on performance. Like if we over rely on performance, then we're going to end up with misleading metrics that lead to like dangerous steps that we could take off the back of it. So we need to understand context, and we need the insight that goes beyond just performance data. So an example here is if we look at Nike. So their recent changes to move more towards D2C came from, and look, I obviously don't work for Nike. I don't know the ins and outs, and I wasn't on any of that kind of program. But on paper, it looked great, right? If you look at their performance metrics, it makes sense that they go to D2C. Like their D2C had increased, they had like soaring revenue growth from it, and of course it would naturally improve their margins. It gives them more control of their performance data and what they're doing and how they're performing generally. So it made sense, right? But it didn't help them understand how consumers actually feel, and didn't factor into how people would actually respond to this big change that they're doing. Is it going to work or not? Like if you detach yourself from wholesalers like Foot Locker, or if you remove your access to the high street, like how do people respond to that? Like just looking at performance data doesn't help with that kind of thing. And it has affected them. Like it's led to like $28 billion market cap loss, and obviously the CEO had resigned and things like that. But part of the lesson here, there's lots of other things that I'm sure input into it, is that performance data might give you comfort and it might, but it can give you fake confidence if you don't have any of the context or any of the additional insight around it. And this is not just about, managing numbers. It's about like, how can you make more sustainable strategies through connecting performance data with human insight? The fifth one that we want to cover off is the fact that micro-optimization is dying in terms of what we can do. Strategic influence is where agencies can win. So micro-optimization tends to sit now in this social grey box, which we all know. As social ads continue to rise, as digital continues to rise, we're having currently less control over that. And, programmatic optimization is happening naturally. So, Meta, TikTok, Google, they're all controlling these things and doing a great job at it, but it gives us less control. So where do we have more control and what can we do to differentiate is having more input in the creative optimization up front, and then the way that we analyze and understand what's happening at the end. So, there's real opportunity to really drive understanding who are the audiences and really inputting into and informing what goes into that creative, and then taking that performance data out of the back of it and understanding why and understanding the root causes around it. And here's just a graph to show this in a bit more context. If we look at how digital is obviously increasing, digital use is increasing, and how all of the data that comes with that is increasing, but our access to that is not. So through GDPR, through cookies, and that is going to change as Web 3.0 becomes more of a thing, and we're going to cover that a little bit more later. So users will start to have more control again, which may not give us more control, but will give users more control that we can buy that kind of data. But at the moment, we need to take advantage of where we can strategically influence outside of the data that we don't have access to. So I think we all know this one. We know that passive exposure doesn't equal engagement, but we're still, again, measuring in the same ways. And I think we're still like slightly covering our eyes with this one. Like we know that click-throughs do not mean that people have actually clicked through consciously and intentionally. Like there's lots of stats out there, and the stats actually vary from between like 10% of people accidentally clicking through to 60%. I've seen like stats that show 60%, I've seen stats that show 10%. I guess the truth is we don't know how many people are accidentally clicking through. We don't know how many people are not clicking through, but intentionally watching something or doing something else in the background. And that's very hard for us to know. So there needs to be a lot of other research that can be done around how can you understand engagement in different ways. Like how can we measure emotional impact? And you can do that at scale. That doesn't have to be done just at like typical like 10 qual sessions. And I'm going to cover that a little bit off later as well. But the idea being like you can really maximize research to understand engagement and not just rely on the metrics that we have easily accessible to us today. And this is the final truth, which we're going to break down in a lot more detail in a second. But tech has meant that research is a lot more accessible to everyone. And there isn't really an excuse for not doing any kind of consumer insight if there's value for it to be done. So if we take like 10 years ago, we would be doing like market research in user testing labs or focus groups where you bring people in and you do small numbers at a time and you rent out a lab space in a room and you have people sit behind a mirror and it doesn't feel natural. And you have two moderators, one running the session and facilitating it, and one taking notes in the background. Then you re-watch the session afterwards. All that has been gone for a long time now. And it's not just due to AI that research has become more efficient. It's through technology that allows us to do qual sessions remotely, where we can access people globally much easier now since COVID. So we can do like qual sessions over Zoom and, no longer need a spare moderator, like taking notes. There are tools that transcribe it all and allow you to pull out quotes easily and deal with translations and things like that. So all of this kind of tech enabled research becoming more effective has been happening for longer than since AI has been like mainstream used, but now there are things that we can do that are even smarter, maximizing AI and new tech. And we're going to cover some of that off now. And as a research business ourselves, like I like to see ourselves as like the voice of reason. Like we're not there just to like bring the hype of all these new technologies, or to say that they are not real, like they don't get the truth out, and like you need humans to run sessions and things like that. Like I really believe for us to survive in this industry, we have to use the right tools, bring in the right tech that allows research to become more mainstream and to be used. So we definitely have opinions on things that work from an AI perspective and things that don't. And we've tried and dabbled with a lot of things as well. And it's still for us, like it's still a learning journey. Like we're still doing quite a lot to grow, and it will continue to be, of course. So yeah, I'm going to go through these 5 things quickly, and then we'll have time for some questions after. So the first one that I'm going to talk about here is mass micro qual, which sounds contradictory in its title in itself, like mass and micro and qual. So qual is, I guess, typically seen as like, small numbers of in-depth research. But actually what you can get is in-depth at a micro scale. Not everything has to be 60-minute one-to-one interviews. And now through the use of AI, when used in the right way, you can use it for AI moderation. So you can run 1,000 participants in depth overnight by using AI moderation. But the key thing here is making sure that, one, it's used in the right way, only used for the right projects and for the right type of research objectives and goals, because I don't think it's useful for everything. And also that you put in the same effort that you would do into a discussion guide, that you really probe it in the right way, you really teach it and train it to get out everything that you would have got out as a moderator. And that's pretty key. So it does take investment up front for that kind of thing. And it needs the right person to do that too, like a researcher, to be able to frame it in the right way. You can also use it for analysis. So we use it a lot for supporting us, almost like an extra person on the team to help us with thematic analysis and picking out all the relevant quotes linked to this objective or goal or insight that we want to get out and extract. And then it streamlines things like obviously translation and being able to do like native language moderation easily if we go back to moderation. So yeah, there's lots of opportunities for how you can use AI to help qual still gain the richness that it has always had, but to be able to do that at scale. The second one here is around new age quant. So we typically, may have used quant for doing like 10-minute surveys to understand attitudes. And we still do that. We still do a lot of that. But when we do that now, because of AI, there's been a lot of challenges too with the authenticity in participants taking part in research. So a lot of people that take part in quant studies and surveys are AI and AI and bot driven fraud, as well as like survey farms and things like that. So we do a lot to clean out the data, which is really key. Like we clean out about 60% of participants to fraudulent behavior. And there's also this other part of quant which makes it partly not believable, is obviously people say one thing and do another. So if you ask people about their stated behaviors and you actually look at how they behave, it may not match up. So using surveys and using quant for attitudes and perceptions is a great thing. Using it to understand past behaviors, if it was in like kind of a long time ago, or asking them about future behaviors which they don't know how they're going to behave, is a lot harder. So what we've got here is using Web 3.0, like a combination of how you bring behavioral data and performance data along with attitudinal surveys. So we're doing this now. It's happening at kind of quite early stages, just in the UK and US. So people sign up to putting in plugins, and at the moment it's a bit manual. Like they have to put plugins or like download apps. and plugins for their emails onto their browsers, so we can track their behavior, and they're being paid for their time. Not their time, for the access. And then they take part in surveys, right? And what you can start to see is, does their behavior match up to what they're saying? You can start to see the intent gap. You can start to see if they've behaved in a certain way, why are they doing that? And what are they saying about this? So you're getting like true response, you're getting authentic like insights, but you're really tying in behavioral and attitudinal stuff together. And this is still a growing area, and it will continue to grow. But yeah, we've got our partners that we work with for this, and we work on this together. Another way of being able to carry out research in an effective way is to, if we took the point of engagement, is how do you like understand how people feel about, say, a campaign or something that they are watching or interacting with. And one of the things that we do is track emotions, and we track attention as well. So previously, when you do any kind of tracking of emotions or attention in Qual, which is where it works best, you'd wear like a headpiece, or you would wear glasses, and it felt very unnatural, and it doesn't feel like you're making like genuine decisions, or you're talking through it how you generally would have fed back. But now, just through like the high definition, we can, like through cameras, we can, and just through remote qual sessions, we can get that kind of understanding by measuring like facial, by like doing facial mapping. So we can understand attention, we can understand emotion. And it used to be quite simple, of like understanding emotion through cameras used to be like quite binary. So it was like happy, sad, positive, negative. Whereas now there's a lot more to it. And as I said, we can like map out attention too, can map out things like confusion. So we know, are they understanding where this is going? Like it allows us to probe differently. And you can tie this kind of thing up with the micro mass micro qual too, so that you can do both of these things together. Previously we talked about silos of different metrics, so having like fragmented like measurement platforms and how it can all come together, and the importance of it all coming together into a single story. And I think this ties in with that point, but it also ties in with understanding like longer term engagement, longer term interaction, and like, and how people resonate with the brand. Like if we think of what our goal is to do, it's to make people like, love the brand, engage with it, connect with it, feel inspired by it, want to act and do something about it. So we've got these 5 categories that we don't always use it when we do any kind of brand tracking, but some of our clients are on more holistic brand trackers that cover these 5 categories. So it covers product proposition, how people feel about the offering and the service and the features of it and how unique it is, brand love, how much they love the brand, and whether that like overrides the other categories, and how they kind of feel connected to it. Anywhere where like human to human interacts, then we look at journey flow and click-throughs across different channels and different touch points and how it comes together. And conflict resolution, which is not always relevant, but often relevant, because sometimes conflict can affect how someone perceives the brand. And if you've had a bad experience with them, it can affect those kind of things. And I think it's important to understand all those little elements that impact how someone engages with the brand. It's not just about the ad, it's about all their feelings and all their things and their, perceptions of how they felt before as well. So these are the kind of things that we can track holistically, track over time. And, these kind of things don't have to be extremely costly, because you run them as, one-off studies that bring together different data sources together. And then you may run it quarterly, and then you may run it so that you can see what happens pre and post campaign and how things change and how behaviors change. And then the final one that's worth mentioning here is, how do you bring in insights so that you can create a culture of being insight driven as a business? So I think, this isn't just for media agencies or agencies in general. Often with brands generally, like there is often a reluctancy to do research because of that perception of it being expensive and taking time, and that's what it used to do. So something that we have is these research plans that a lot of our agencies are on, as well as brands that are on them. But the idea being, we're trying to get agencies to build a culture internally and externally of being insight driven. So you have monthly credit that you can use, and one month you'd use it for quant, next month you use it for qual. You can use it for different brands, different projects, and different stages of the process too. So it may be that you use it to bolster GWI data with understanding micro segments and understanding how people feel or what they care about beyond what we already know about them from YouGov or GWI. Or it may be that we're doing some campaign testing to test emotional response to something before it going live, so that when it goes into the social grey box, we've got that kind of richness on top. So yeah, I think there's like, if there are 3 questions that I'd want you to act on and take away from today, it's what creative ways can you gather insight considering time and cost? Because a lot of these things are time and cost efficient that we discussed. How can you go beyond traditional marketing metrics to capture and improve impact? So it's not just about measuring impact, but what can we do to improve it, not just through micro optimization, but even strategically? And then how can human insights help you to differentiate from what you do today as an agency and differentiate you from other agencies too? So these are 3 things that I want you to take away. And just before we open up for questions, if you're interested, we have 2 things I think you might be that you might really enjoy. So the first is our thinking cap community that we have, which is a place for you to kind of take in and digest new and upcoming things that are happening in research and tech that would be useful for you potentially, but also not just to hear from us, but to hear from other industry experts, from brands, from other agencies, that will all feed into this. So sometimes we release things like a research effectiveness report, or it may be 5 things that CMOs of top brands have shared from our interviews with them that we share on with you. So yeah, if you're interested in that, please do sign up. And then we also have a breakfast coming up, a breakfast roundtable, which will be in Duck and Waffle in early June. So we have a nice private breakfast in the private dining room, and we discuss with other agency founders or other agency heads of on the topic of protecting research without sacrificing speed. So if you are interested in that, please do pop yes in the chat, and Amy and Katie, who are also in the chat, can follow up with you after. So yeah, thank you very much. And please do get in touch if you want to hear more or want to have any kind of one-to-one conversation after this. The problem with a webinar is you don't get the engagement, and I don't get to see your faces or feed off of that. But it would be really good to have any kind of one-to-one chats afterwards, and any questions that you have now too. Thank you. I'm going to stop sharing now.
Thanks, Veronica. So I've got a couple of questions in the chat. I've also got a question myself, but I think this is just because of what I'm interested in, rather than what the agencies might be interested in. But I'll start with the questions that we've got in the Q&A. Do you have any advice for convincing clients of the value of research? I suppose if it is, costly, how is it? Where does the value come from?
Yeah. So yes, I always think the best way to do that, I always think when clients have a bit of research, they really value it. It's just getting them to see that potential in the first place. So I think anything that you can do that is extremely low cost and extremely kind of rapid to do in the background that doesn't take up budget, you do that first, and then that usually uncovers something that is happening. Or if you have access to any kind of existing performance data but you don't know why that's happening, the best thing to do is to say, this is what we're seeing X, Y, and Z, but we're not seeing why or what to do about it. And so just doing a little bit of micro research can help us understand how do we tackle that versus just kind of guessing that through. But yeah, there's I always say start small and then build it up over time. And show the potential of a little bit of micro research first, and then they see the value of it. But the main thing is to start with a data point that we don't know how to tackle and use research
Okay,
to help that.
cool. Thank you. A couple more questions. So, what kind of projects do you do with agencies at the moment? And I mean, we put on this webinar really targeting media agencies because of the data that they hold. But it's not just media agencies that you work with. So if you can just give some examples of what you do,
Yeah.
uh, that'd be great.
Yeah. So when we work with agencies, there's, I guess, two kind of brackets. We've got like work that we do, research that we do with them that helps them grow as an agency. So maybe like supporting on white papers. So yeah, it could be supporting on any kind of work or area that you want to develop or become an expert in yourself, and sometimes our agencies will monetize that data too and sell that. So it might be selling a white paper or sending an index or a leaderboard or something like that. And the other part that falls into that camp is insight that feeds into pitches. So helping them understand, like showing their brands or their clients at pitch level that they know the industry, they know the market, they know this audience, they know what to do. And that kind of thing is usually very light and quick and easy to do. And then we also help live on projects. So often with media agencies, it's around kind of quite rapid quant studies. But with different types of agencies, like say digital agencies or more creative agencies, it might be like more like qual testing. And so there's really a range of things. For one of our media agency partners, we do quite a bit of like segmentation type work. So it's not just about, they're not just relying on GWI and YouGov. They've actually got their own custom segments that they understand of that brand. Yeah, there's all sorts, but I'm happy to share more on that kind of thing too.
Yeah, that'd be good. Maybe we can share like some case studies,
Yeah.
like in our upcoming newsletter, which would be
Also
cool.
brand trackers. Brand trackers is a big one
Yeah.
for us. So we work a lot with agencies on brand trackers for their clients, and then it just makes it easier to like to track pre and post campaign and see all
Mhm.
the work that they're doing, how that impacts the results. But yeah.
Perfect. Um, how often do you recommend conducting the research to gather the types of holistic insight you talked about? Can it be done ad hoc or stick to doing it monthly, quarterly, etc.?
Yeah, we do. I mean, we do ad hoc projects too. I think if you're doing any kind of creative or any kind of thing that requires measurement pre and post, then doing it regularly does help, because you don't want to just do straight away pre-post and that's it. You want to track over time and see how things are happening. But yeah, we do a lot of ad hoc too. And again, the ad hoc studies don't have to be like meaty 100K, 200K projects. Like they can be
Mhm.
15K, 10 to 15K, like quick bits of insight that allow you to, or like in some cases, even 5K, just like small bits of insight that allow you to understand an audience or understand a market.
Perfect. And then last question, I believe. Yeah. So do you conduct research with B2B audiences? Because this was, primarily in consumer.
Yeah.
Can you share any information on that and how you get that data, maybe?
Yeah, loads. We do loads of B2B. We do loads of B2B and loads of B2C and even B2B2C too. So we we have access to audiences. So we have like specialist panels that we've built up ourselves. We work with specialist panels too, but we have like dedicated recruitment teams. So when we do any
Mhm.
kind of research, we scrape for audiences, we target them. We've got like lots of B2B and B2C. Yeah. Even
Perfect.
things like brand trackers, we do B2B brand trackers too, and like having that holistic framework that we mentioned, like we have a custom version of that for B2B too.
Cool. And then I had a question.
Yeah.
Um, it's just about the where was it? So the emotional impact, but more the attention span. We've got, a younger audience nowadays, or a generation with a decreasing attention span. Have you seen much of a shift in that data over the years? This is just what I was interested in. So
Yeah. So actually, I was at Market Research Society a couple of weeks ago, and there was a talk that covered one of these points that actually had some inaccurate data in it, but it is still interesting, which is our attention span now is is decreasing, but I think now our attention span is about 8 seconds, which is less than a goldfish. Um, so the person on the talk put 4 seconds, which wasn't the case, but the fact that it's even 8 seconds and it's decreasing just goes to show how little time we have to gain attention. So yeah, that's like a benchmark.
yeah, it's exciting. That's cool to know. All right. I don't think there's many other questions. We've got a couple of people just sharing their LinkedIn, or one person sharing their LinkedIn chat, interested in the roundtable. So I'll share the information on that. Will I
Yeah.
be able to share this
Yeah.
this presentation with everyone in the call?
Sure. Yeah,
Cool.
absolutely. Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Well, I'll leave that here. I don't think we have any other questions unless anyone. I'll give you a minute to share anything else. But if not, we'll give you 20 minutes of your well, yeah, 20 minutes of your lunch back.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Take
And
care.
yeah, I'll send a follow up tomorrow morning.
Perfect. Thanks,
Take care
Alfie.
all.
Bye.
Bye.